wanna play it.
That's the thing they do, right? What's up, guys? Welcome to my new series. It's called Valorant BootCamp. This is going to be the first episode, and what we're going to go over today is some very, very basic stuff. It's actually going to apply to more games than just Valorant. I'm just calling it BootCamp because all the other videos are going to be more Valorant specific. But this one's just going to teach you like how to set up your mouse, your keyboard, in the way that I like, your monitor as well. Some setting stuff, some mouse and DPI stuff, and more technical specifics. All this stuff will apply to other games as well, but when it comes to the settings, I'm just going to be showing Valorant, and that's just because this whole series is going to be about Valorant. So to be more specific, what we're going to go over today is your mouse and keyboard setup, your sensitivity and your DPI, and what I would recommend. Obviously, it's going to be different for everyone. I will preface this by saying that a lot of these things are going to be very individual. It's like a crosshair, like you can make anything work. If you get used to your setup and your DPI, even if it's a lot higher than I would recommend, you can get good with it. It just takes time. The reason that I'm giving you a recommended stance is because this is what most people use. And what that means is that you're more likely to be able to get good with it. There's always going to be outliers, like professional players. Some of them use really high sensitivity, some of them use really high DPI. That doesn't mean that high DPI is better. It just means that they've gotten used to that and they're really good at that because they've grinded it out. Low sensitivity is always going to be more consistent for a new player. If you've been using high DPI a long time and you're still a wrist aimer, I would stick with it. Just grind it out, and I'll go over that later in the video. But just remember, a lot of these things are very subjective, and I'm just trying to give you what I think is the most comfortable setup, and also just the easiest setup to get used to. I'll also be going over some key bindings and stuff that I like to use. This is just things to give you inspiration for your own. Key bindings are completely personal choice. There are reasons I use the ones, and I'll give you those, but don't look too much into key bindings. I think sensitivity, DPI, and all your other, like your setup with your monitor, your mouse and keyboard is far more important than your key bindings. You can get good with basically any set of key bindings as long as you can reach them all. So first of all, let's get into how to set up your mouse mat and keyboard with your monitor for basically the most comfort, and also to give yourself less pain in your back and your shoulder. And this is something that probably happens to a lot of people after a long playing session. They'll get a sore shoulder, they'll get a sore back from leaning forward, the goblin gamer stance. And I just want to go over how you can avoid this, because it really stops you from playing for a long time if you want to get into a grind. So as you can see from these quick videos on my phone, I have my mouse mat tilted diagonally. The reason I do this is because my arm span goes from one corner to the other corner. So if I had my mouse mat in a square, like towards me, I wouldn't actually have the maximum range of motion for my mouse mat. So I have it in a diamond so that each extremity of the swing of my arm is at the farthest part of the mouse mat. Another thing to think about is make sure you're anchoring your elbow. That doesn't need to be on the desk. I do it on the desk just because I find that more comfortable. I actually have the armrests off of my chair so that I can get in close and put my elbow on the desk. So that's something worth considering. Also, you can just use your armrest of your chair. So just put your elbow on your armrest, and that way you've got the pivot point for your elbow. It's really important to have this because having a floating elbow not only means that you're going to be less consistent, it also means that your arm's going to get tired from being up in the air all the time. If you have a floating arm, your arm gets tired almost instantly. When I moved into a new house, I didn't have any furniture, which meant I had my chair with no armrests, but I was playing on a really shallow desk, and I had to have a floating arm, and I could play for maybe an hour and a half maximum before my arm would start to get tired from having it floating in the air. It's probably something you could get used to, and you'd get used to grinding it out, but I would highly recommend anchoring your elbow on something, whether it's your desk, your armrest, or one of those little extenders that comes out from the desk that you can buy. Just something to have your elbow sitting on so that you're not lifting your arm all the time. One thing that I do as well is, as you'll see, I have my keyboard tilted quite severely. That's only when I play games. I don't type like that. The reason for this is because I like to have my arms both pointing inwards. I'll put up a quick video of this. It's going to be difficult to film both of my hands, so I might just do one at a time. But I have my arms both pointing inwards. So when I sit into my desk, my arms are almost like this. And it's kind of weird to visualize. So I'm sitting at my desk. I have my mouse here and my keyboard here. and my arm span's like this. I just find that a lot more comfortable than having my arms like this. As I said earlier, this is going to hurt your shoulders. If your arms are sitting straight, you get a lot of shoulder fatigue. It's not as bad as having a floating arm or as playing with your one arm way back, one arm way forward. But I find having my arms inwards like this just causes the least amount of strain. It's not for accuracy or anything like that. It's just I find that I don't get as tired when I play like that. Another thing I do is I actually play with my monitor quite close to my face. That's completely preference based. I just like having it complete my field of view. It's up to you. One thing I'll show you is the monitor stand I use. These aren't that expensive. They're maybe, I think it was about £40 or something, which is expensive for a monitor stand, I guess. But it means that I can like a really big range of motion with my monitor and basically move it wherever I want. So when I'm not playing, I can push it way back. Just for like general like web browsing or doing any work and stuff, I can push it back and use it like a normal monitor. And if I'm playing, I can pull it forward and tilt it. And the reason I tilt it towards me is that I don't want to be looking up or looking straight. It sounds odd, but looking slightly down with my head against the headrest of my chair means that I'm not straining my neck at all, if that makes sense. So I'm kind of sitting on my chair. I've got my head against the headrest leaning forward, and I can just look kind of at a slight downward angle, and that's where my eyes want to be. I'm not having to hold my head up or support my head in any way. The headrest does that for me. With that, I'll actually segue onto how I sit, because I think this is actually really important. So when I'm playing, I always make sure that my posture is good. This may sound a bit weird, but you'll notice a lot of people play. Let me just move this back a little bit, and they're like this. They've got, hold on. They're like this. They've got the gamer stance going on, the gamer sit. This is really bad, and I give you a really sore back. A lot of back issues, because I didn't have as good a chair not that long ago, and I had to sit like that because it couldn't come forward. I would recommend getting a chair that has this kind of back adjustment where you can go backward and forward. Having it up, like upright, almost like a slight forward angle is what I play at. That way I can sit completely straight, and if I tilt this down a bit, I might actually be able to show you a bit better what I'm talking about. I sit completely straight, and my arms are just here. My elbows anchored on the desk here. I'm not saying as close as I would normally be. My elbows anchored on the desk here, and my keyboard's right here. And I'm sitting completely straight. So my back's not going to get sore from leaning forward or from doing any of that thing. And that's why I move my monitor close as well. Because a lot of people lean forward. That would be louder. Lean forward to get closer to their monitor. So I just have my monitor there, so I don't have to lean forward. It stops me from doing that kind of, this thing that hurts your back after not long. And it means that I can play longer, and also that I don't wake up and I'm like, oh my god, my back's so sore from being in a gamer goblin stance. So one thing I want to quickly cover is mouse grips. This again is something that you can choose for yourself. It does depend on what mouse you have, but I would recommend just trying all of them and seeing what works best for you. So I'm going to have some quick comparisons between them. The first I'll go over is palm grip. So what this means is you have your hand completely on the mouse, your fingers are flat, your palms against the mouse, and you're basically just you're holding it as you would, none of your hands off the mouse, so fingers at the side, all good. The next one is claw grip. So this is your fingers are slightly pulled back in like a claw. So you've got a gap between your middle of your fingers and the mouse, and you clawed on it, but your back of your palm is still against the mouse. This is what I use. This gives the best stability, just holding your mouse, and I like the slight claw because it means you can do slight fingertip adjustments without having to go full fingertip. The last one is full fingertip grip. Now, this is really good, and it's really good if you have a small mouse and a light mouse. The only reason I don't use this is because it's really uncomfortable after a while. Like, holding your mouse in your fingertips like that, it does get quite, like, painful, I guess, on your fingertips. I don't know how to explain it. It's kind of straining. But again, you can get used to it, especially if you've got a small mouse or a light mouse. You can definitely get really used to it. Like I said, I just don't use it because I don't find it comfortable. And every time I try and use fingertip, because I do sometimes try and mix up my grip styles to try them, I fall back into claw. My palm just goes back into claw just after a little while. But definitely experiment with all three of these and see which one works best for you. So your sensitivity in your DPI is going to be something that's really personal to you. I would recommend just going for a normal DPI level just so you can see what other people use. So maybe like 400 or 800. Even, I guess even 1600, but I would recommend 400 or 800 if you're setting your DPI, just because that's what most players use, so you can get a baseline for what's going to be good to work off of. So I use 800 DPI and 0.38 cents in Valorant, which is about average. It's not on the very, very low side, but it's not on the way high side either. It's kind of low, average to low. I wouldn't recommend, I'm trying to think about like the extremes. I probably wouldn't recommend having more than 1 sense, 800 DPI, but people can make it work. It's just that it's going to be so hard to get the muscle memory down when you've got a higher sense like that. Not impossible, just a lot harder. So just make sure that if you're using a higher sense, that you know your sense well and that you're taking it from another game. If you're completely new to PC or completely new to Valorant and you've not played many shooters, start off with a lower sensitivity. Do 800 0.5 or 800 0.4 and just try it out and see how you feel with it. I wouldn't recommend starting off on high sensitivity because you're just going to make everything so much harder for you. Leading on for this, I do want to talk a bit about aim trainers. So the way I see aim trainers is they're not going to directly make you better at the game. It's kind of like doing weight or fitness training to train for a sport, if that makes sense. So doing like weight training isn't going to make you better, like a better, say you're in a boxing or something. Doing direct weight training isn't going to make you a better boxer. But if you don't do weight training, then you're not going to have any strength. So the way that I see aim trainers, it's like building muscle memory. So if you put in the same sensitivity into something like aim labs as you have in Valorant and just do grid shot for half an hour, it's not going to directly make you any better at Valorant, but it is going to make you more comfortable with your sensitivity, which is going to make it easier to hit shots. So as long as you have like a healthy balance of playing some aim trainers and then going back to Valorant and playing more Valorant than you do the aim trainer, of course, it will make you play better. It will make you able to hit more shots, undoubtedly. But just make sure you're not overdoing the aim trainer. You know, you don't want to be an aim trainer main. You're just using it as a tool to better your flicks, better your muscle memory with your own sensitivity. Because you can actually put in your Valorant sensitivity into aim labs, which is actually really helpful for getting used to the muscle memory. So the last thing I want to go over is my key bindings in Valorant. Most of mine are default. I haven't changed a great deal. I use B for push to talk, so my buy menu's on N, but that just depends on what you use to push to talk. The only thing I wouldn't recommend is using a button on your mouse for push to talk. I used to use mouse button 5, which is the forward mouse button at the side. I wouldn't recommend using a button on your mouse, and the only reason for this is because if you're making a comm and someone peeks you, and you're using a button on your mouse, it makes it harder to aim. Just having that pressure makes it harder to aim. Off the back of that, I also use toggle aim. That is the default in Valorant, but I know a lot of people like to hold right click when they're aiming, or to aim in. The reason I wouldn't do this is, one, because you have a lot of pressure on your hand while you're aiming in. Secondly, in Valorant, you're going to be aiming in to hold long angles, and you don't want to be holding right click that long. Also, the operator, you need to secondary bind. If you really want to stick by hold zoom, that's fine, but just make sure you bind something for your double zoom, because you can't just right click twice to double zoom if you're using hold. You need to bind a separate key. So make sure that you do bind that, just so that if you're holding a really long angle, you can actually double scope. I only noticed this because some of my friends actually use hold aim, and I noticed they weren't double scoping, and I asked, and the button's not automatically bound when you set it to hold aim. So just make sure that you're like binding something to that double zoom, or you're going to be doing yourself out of a feature that the op has. One other thing I would definitely change is take swap weapons off of scroll down and scroll up. You don't want to be changing weapons with the scroll wheel. Trust me, no good player, I won't say no good player, that's maybe not true. Most 99.9% of pro or good players don't use scroll wheel to swap their weapons. The reason is that it's inaccurate. You don't want to try and scroll through your weapons to get to your knife or to get to your main gun. Use the numbers. Just use the numbers. 1, 2, and 3. 3 for your knife. I also have a hot swap. This is a Counter-Strike habit. It's normally Q in Counter-Strike, but I actually bind it to my back mouse button. It's mainly for opping, so I can quickly swap between knife and op for quick swapping, also for reload cancels and stuff. But it's good to have that. It's good to have the quick swap, just for going between your knife and your main gun if you're moving around quickly. And I like having it on Mist 4 because it's really quick to access. Having it on Q or having it on something else is fine as well. I would just check, make sure you have a switch to previous weapon bound. Just so you can go quickly between your knife and your primary gun without having to think about numbers or move your hands off movement keys. And also for opping, so you can quick swap to cancel the rescope. I have my secondary ability bound to V instead of E. The main reason for this is for jet dashes, because I don't want to have to take my hand off, or my finger off of D to dash to the right. Do you know, if I want to dash to the right, I need to be holding D and I need to press E, and those are done with the same finger for me. So I rebound it to V and I just press it with my thumb. So it's the same for every agent now. It's just every main ability It's like the primary one that resets is on V for me. That's something to think about, but it's not something that you have to do at all. I also have raises satchels double bound to a mouse button, just so I can easily, because you normally have to press Q, but you want to be strafe jumping with the satchels, so I don't want to have to press Q and take my finger off a D or off a D and hold A at the same time. Just a little awkward, so I have that double bound to a mouse button. Just think about your bindings to be as easy as possible to do everything you need to do. You don't need to copy my bindings or anyone else's bindings. Just make them as easy as they can be for you, and make them something you don't have to think about, and just get used to them. The only important ones, like I say, are having a double zoom bound if you're using hold aim. Make sure you're not using scroll wheel to swap your weapons, and also just make sure you're able to do everything you can. Also, if you want, you can bind jump to scroll wheel down, or scroll wheel up, I guess. There are scroll wheel up jumpers. This is for bunny hopping. I'll probably have bunny hopping in a whole separate video, or I will have bunny hopping in a separate video. It'll be in the movement video. But make sure you have jump bound to scroll down or scroll up. It just makes it a lot easier to do bunny hops, and also it's like a Counter-Strike thing. It's just easier in times like sometimes you don't want to press space to jump. You can just use scroll wheel. It gives you the jump input on every frame, and it makes some of the harder jumps a lot easier than if you're using spacebar. A couple of closing points. I have all my graphics settings on low, just for maximum frames. I would recommend having a high refresh rate monitor if it's something that you can get. So a 144 at least, or a 240. They are dropping in price because the 360 Hz has come out. I would recommend at least 144 Hz if you are wanting to take this game seriously. It's a lot better. It's a night and day difference, honestly. Just find a way to try one if you've never tried one. And you can never go back. As soon as you've played on 144 Hz, it's so difficult to go back to 60. It's something I would always recommend to upgrade to. Like, I would upgrade that before upgrading my PC again, to be honest. If I knew the difference and I didn't have a good PC or anything, I would upgrade that before upgrading anything. Having 144 Hz as a minimum is such a difference maker for fast-paced shooter games. It's insane. I can't speak highly enough of it. And make sure if you get one that you swap your Hertz in, I don't know why I've got a pen, that you swap your refresh rate in Windows, or you're not going to get the benefit of it. The absolute final point I have is my minimap. You may have noticed in some of the gameplay clips, if I've put any gameplay clips, I don't even remember. You may have noticed in some of the gameplay clips, my minimap doesn't actually spin. That's something you can do, it's preference. I like it to be stationary, that way I just know where the map is all the time. I don't need to think about how it rotates in relation to me. Again, completely preference. Just, it's important to know that that's something you can do. You can make your minimap not spin, you can choose what side that it's favoured, like what side is at the bottom, what side is at the top, how big it is, what it shows, things like that. Just have a play about with it. Just make sure it's as good as it can be for you. I like mine to be a little bit bigger than default and to not spin, and to be zoomed out so that it shows the whole map. Because by default it'll spin and it won't show all of the map on your minimap. It'll only show maybe 3/4, or more like 2/3 actually. So just make sure that it's set up exactly how you'd want it. That's the most important thing. Not to copy other people. That's good if you're just starting out and you don't know what you want, but make sure you tailor it to yourself. All of these things, like, it's good to have a baseline, but make sure you're like trying out your sensitivity and swapping it, trying out your settings, your key bindings, and if you don't like some of them, just swap them and try it out. Don't just get stuck following one person. These kind of videos is a guideline. It's not just hard and fast rules. If you like a higher sensitivity, if you like a higher sensitivity, use a higher sensitivity. It's just important to know that it's going to be harder to get used to. Not impossible, just harder to get used to. You might want to aim with your wrist only. Go for it. Just know that you're possibly limiting yourself. Okay guys, so that concludes episode 1 of Valorant BootCamp. So I know this video hasn't been very Valorant specific. It's just because I wanted to get a baseline out there first, so that you know how I've set everything up, how I like to keep my posture straight, shoulders straight, have an anchor, everything like that. I think it's important to know, specifically for newer players, so that they can get an idea of how to set their stuff up and then work on it from there. Have an idea of how to have a good posture rather than hurting your back by leaning forward. Stuff like that. So thank you so much for watching. I hope it was helpful. I understand if you've been playing games a lot, this series up until later episodes might not be entirely for you, especially if you've got a lot of Counter-Strike experience. This series might not be that valuable for you. Maybe you might pick up some new stuff, but this is aimed at people who are new to tactical shooters like Counter-Strike and Valorant. It isn't really aimed to like CS veterans or people who are already fairly good at Valorant. I'm going to be going over some very basic fundamental stuff in some of the other videos that those kind of people will probably know about already. But if you are kind of new, do stick around. If you like this video, give it a like. If you want to subscribe so you can see the later episodes. The next episode will be on the gunplay mechanics, and I'll go over like sprays and taps and all the spray part and stuff, all the gun specific stuff, when is a good time to aim down sights, just all the base gun mechanics of Valorant that aren't as obvious for people that haven't played Counter-Strike before. You know, I see a lot of beginner players, they just don't understand the gun mechanics. They're just holding a crosshair on someone. Why don't they die? Well, you can find out in the next video. So if you think that's something that'll help you, do please subscribe. That video will be coming out hopefully in the next couple of weeks. I am a bit tied up with uni work and stuff, but I do want to get this series going. I think it'll be a lot of fun, and I hope it'll be helpful for people. So thanks again. If you want to see me play live, I do have a Twitch. It's down in the description, and so come check me out there. I'll be doing some doing a lot of Valorant, also play Tarkov, Apex, just a bunch of games there. Mainly Valorant for the time being, just because I do want to grind it out and make these videos. So I'm going to be farming for gameplay footage. But cheers guys, catch you after.